I am fantasy author Elle Penelope, and welcome to My Imaginary Friends, a look behind the scenes at an author mapping the worlds in my head and making them a reality. Hello friends, today is Friday, March 22nd, 2019, and this is episode 6 of My Imaginary Friends. I'm Leslie. It's spring. There are birds chirping outside the window pretty loudly, not quite as loud as the roosters that live next door, who crow all day long. I had no idea that roosters crow all day long until I moved into this house, and our neighbors have at least 2 that I hear, and a bunch of chickens. They used to keep bees as well, so when we first moved in, I was pretty nervous. I've never been stung by a bee, and I don't want to be. And the idea that they kept all of these bees was a little unnerving. But I haven't seen any bees in the past year, during the summer. So my mom she would ask when we first moved in if we would go and get some eggs and see if they give out eggs to people or buy them or something. And I don't really eat eggs at all. Like, I'll bake with eggs, I'll eat things with eggs in them, but just the taste of eggs is gross to me. So I never pursued that. I don't know if they give out eggs. I haven't seen any or heard of that happening. Maybe they use their eggs for their own purposes. But yeah, so I know you probably cannot hear that, and I don't actually hear the roosters anymore either. They blended into the tapestry of the audio sphere of the house, but it's only when people come and visit that, and they're like, was that a rooster? I'm like, yes, suburban Maryland, we do have roosters, oddly enough. But anyway, this week's best thing. As I predicted last week, this week's best thing is the Ravenels series by Lisa Kleypas. I finished the series. I read 5 books in something like 3.5 days. I was binging, and there's a reason for that, and we'll talk about that later. But I do read very fast, and since then, I've probably read 3 or 4 other books total so that brings my total to maybe 9 for the week, which is pushing it, but good reason. So I enjoy the Ravenel series quite a lot. It's historical romance. I don't know if it's Regency. I don't actually know much about eras. It was 1875, I think, were the years. It seems kind of modernish. They were all talking about railroads and, industrial magnates, building up. And the end of the period of the peerage, the lords and ladies being rich, and they were starting to lose their money. And so I assume that was towards the decline of that whole system, whatever. But I did enjoy the books quite a lot. So yeah, if you're interested in historical romance and you haven't read the series, highly recommended. So now I'm kind of in historical romance kick after that. So the other 4 books that I've read since then, I think have all been historical. I'm not quite ready to leave that into other subgenres. And because I am writing fantasy, I do try not to read in my genre while especially at this stage, in the revision stage of writing, I'm always afraid of seepage, of ideas, finding the things that I'm reading kind of working themselves into my writing. And I don't know if that actually ever happens, but it is a concern. And so I focus on other genres. So I don't read fantasy when I'm writing fantasy. Of course, I'm always writing fantasy right now, and I will be for the next year. So that makes it a little bit difficult when it's a genre that I love to read. I will read paranormal romance when I'm writing fantasy because it's different enough. And then contemporary, for a while I didn't love contemporary romance, but now I do. Certain ones, good ones, obviously. I like good books. But yeah, it's just very mood based. And when you're in this kick, I'm in this world, I sunk into it. I have the rules straight for, Regency England or whatever period it is in my mind. It makes it a 100-year span, from Jane Austen, who was writing, I think her books take place in the late 1700s to the late 1800s. That's a vibe. Although I was reading a Scottish book, which was actually really good. Never Seduce a Scot by Maya Banks. Very, also highly recommended. And I don't think she put a year in that, but and I'm not well versed in European history to know what year it could have been, but it felt earlier, definitely. So in writing, I am still working on book 3 of the Earthsinger Chronicles, Cry of Metal and Bone. I finally finished my fast draft last weekend, and so I'm in the revision stage. I was hoping to get through at least 4 scenes this week, and so far I have gotten through 2, because each scene took me 2 days to complete, unfortunately. And then the first day I actually had to spend going back and looking at the plot again and tightening things up. And so it is an excruciatingly slow pace that I am on currently. And, but, that is what it is. And it actually goes into what I wanted to talk about, because once again, this week I was on my brief periods of social media. I saw something that someone had posted that really spoke to what I am going through at this moment. And so the author, Robin Lefevers, who is fantastic, I also highly recommend her books. It's the His Fair Assassin series, and about this group of female assassins, and it's like a YA book, and they're in some, like, Brittany in like the 1500s maybe. It's really good. So Robin Lefevers, who is kind of giving a masterclass in her Instagram feed. She'll post these posts about revision and fiction and writing fantasy and just all this great stuff. So this one was on decision fatigue, and which is very, very real. And it's something that I had thought about before and heard about before in relation to other things, but especially with writing. So she was talking about all of the decisions that we have to make as writers, especially fantasy writers, but all writers really. But in fantasy, when you're creating a world from scratch, it's so much. So she says that there's nothing more frustrating to me than being in the flow, zooming along, and then running smack into a series of choices and decisions I need to make before I can keep going. And that is exactly what was happening to me. That was why it was taking 2 days to write each scene. Because, my fast draft is written very quickly. I can write like 2,000 words in a half an hour when I'm just fast drafting. And so that won't have sensory details. It won't have setting. It won't have descriptions of people. It's just, I try to get the emotional core and then the events that happen to take me, my cause and effect, the chain of cause and effect that leads from the beginning to the end of the story. And so now in the revision state, I have to go in and fill in all these details, not just deciding, what the rooms look like and what the furniture they're sitting on and the position, but like history. The scene I was writing yesterday, so they were talking, there was a conversation happening about the origin of the secret society. And so in the fast draft, I knew there was a secret society. I knew what they were doing right now, but I had given cursory thought to their history, how they came about, but I had to stop the writing and pause. And whereas, in the fast draft, I would just put some X's in the text and know that I have to go back later. It's later now, so I have to figure it out. So in that instance, I have a document in my Story Bible, which Story Bible is a Scrivener file, and Scrivener is the software that I use to write my novels in. So I have a separate file that has character bios, like all my characters, all my locations. There's like groups and factions. There's the history of all the worlds, which is what I was looking at. That's where I have the languages. All the names are stored there. So it's just the repository for all of the information about the world and the world building across the series. So I had to go back to the history of Elsira, the country, and then, look and see, do I have anything? Is there a point in this history where I can, where would the origin of this secret society fit? And then I had to create an origin story, figure out who started it, why, what they were doing in the past, who knows about what they were doing since it's secret, how they know about it. And all of these things aren't going to be on the page in this conversation. It's just, oh, there was a secret society and they started, and I heard they started here. And, you have to pick out, only as much as the reader needs to understand what they need to know right then. And then, figure out if there's more detail that have to go in later. But I had to know them, and I had to figure it out, and I had to decide. And so it's just, Robin Lefevers calls it having to play 3D chess with myself as I try to figure out the implications of each decision. And that is so true, because I'm in book 3 now. And so some of it is looking at the history, and some of it is looking at previous books and finding a scene where this character was talking about this thing and making sure I'm not contradicting that and making sure that it matches. And it's exhausting and it takes a long time. And so scheduling a book 3 is different than scheduling a book 1. And also in the series, books 1 and 2 are parallel stories. So I didn't have this problem with book 2 because I didn't really have to go back to anything. I was looking, the time. I was looking at the timeline. The biggest thing with book 2, with Whispers of Shadow and Flame, is the period of time that it takes place and what's happening. Keeping track of the calendar. So my calendar was very important, and because I did, there is crossover. There is so Song of Blood and Stone. We start with the main character Jack, and he's just finished this. He's coming back into his country after having, been a spy in Lagrimar, in this other country. So book 2 takes place in Lagrimar and happens. It actually starts before the events of Song of Blood and Stone and runs concurrently with it. And so there's parts in time where there's points in time where I had to know, okay, when did Jack get back in book 1? Where is he now? And things like that. But other than that, it wasn't like what I'm doing now in book 3, when these two storylines kind of converge and all the characters converge and conversations from book 1, matter in this and what was said. And there are times when I'm going to contradict it on purpose, but it has to be on purpose. And so, this decision fatigue, it's just like every step of the way I have to decide, and that takes a lot of mental energy. And so what Robin Lefevre was saying in her post, which is what I also find myself doing, is that, she was saying that she wears the same clothes every day at a certain part in her writing schedule when she's deep in this decision-making process, and she eats the same thing every day. So she reduces the number of other decisions she has to make to free up mental space and energy to make these decisions in her creative world. And that is, it's really powerful, and I've done that, and it actually helps. I was doing meal prep for a while in terms of like with exercise and trying to make sure I get, eat the macros and stuff. So I would on Sundays cook a bunch of chicken breast and salmon fillets and then make some rice or mashed potatoes and then like a green vegetable. And I actually bought on Amazon these containers, like bento boxes. They're like divided containers. So I cook all the food. I would divide it out so that during the week, all I would have to do is take a container out of the refrigerator and put it in the microwave, and then I would eat. I didn't have to decide what I was eating that day. I didn't even have to decide on the portions. It was just already done. It was fast, and it saved me from having to think about it at all. So that is what I need to be doing right now, really. And it just requires planning and setup and, making sure I have the groceries and then taking the time on a specific day. What I do currently is eat the same thing for breakfast every morning. Every morning, I eat steel-cut oats. Once a week, I make 7 servings of steel-cut oats, and I put them in the containers, little Tupperware, and then I just pull it out. And so I have steel-cut oats and some fruit and sometimes some protein, if there's like a leftover chicken or whatever I've eaten. And that makes breakfast time super easy. So that is one part of the plan for productivity that really works. And so if I can get that working for lunch and dinner, it would be great. When I discovered that Grubhub and DoorDash go to my house a few months ago, that was great too, because stopping in the middle of the day to cook or even to warm up something or to figure out what to eat and defrost stuff, like if I don't pre-plan, then I have to make all of these choices. And even if I'm ordering something that delivers, I have to choose a restaurant and then choose a meal. And it doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not a lot, but it's just more decisions. And I think that you probably have a quota of decisions you can make every day, because by the end of the day, after I've written for several hours and then done even more hours of website stuff and coding and troubleshooting and doing technical things, my brain is fried. It gets, I feel like I just need to go and sit in a quiet room for a period of time and have no one talk to me and not talk to anybody else. And that is why I've been binge reading so much. Because I can either watch something on TV, but reading is a lot more satisfying in many ways. And sometimes there are times when I don't feel like reading. It's very rare, and that's when I go and binge watch something usually. The other thing that I was thinking about in terms of decision fatigue and this binge reading that I've been doing is that high output requires high input. So I'm in this, very intense writing period where I feel my brain working, and I have to stay on top of so many things. And then work has been very, very intense this week. I've had a rush project to do, which has taken a lot of all the rest of my mental energy. And so my output is just very high right now. And I think that for my balance, I need a lot of input. So that's why, and because I read so fast, it's just binging books one after another. I stop one. I can go through a whole series. When I end the series, it's like, okay, what do I do now? Does this author have something else that sounds cool? Or do I look at one of the many unread books on my Kindle that I've either downloaded the sample or actually bought the book and haven't read it yet? And that choice is very emotionally based. Like right now, I told you I am currently in a historical romance period. So there's a lot of other things on my Kindle that need to be read, but I'm still vibing off historicals. And so that input, filling the well, is also what it's called. It not only provides balance and calms me down, and kind of resets me, but it is inspiration. As writers, we need to be reading. And, a lot of people are like, I don't have time to read. And for me, it's not an option, because if I don't read consistently, I will get stuck, or I will get burnt out, or I will just start feeling empty. And that input need becomes really high. And so I listen to it, part of my job. And I try to tell people this, I'm not just reading for pleasure. Like, I am reading for pleasure, but part of my job as an author is to be a reader also, to know what's out there. Like, part of it's market driven. Like, you have to know what's being written and what's popular, and especially with self-publishing. But the other part is just as a creative person, I need to feed my creativity. And so that is the other part of the serious binge session that I've been doing. And this book, it's book 3, Cry of Metal and Bone, is hitting me hard. And the fact that so much of it is written, it's just this extra storyline that I'm putting in, which is also difficult weaving it in. Like there's a lot of points of difficulty of this process that I'm currently engaged in right now, that I will be glad when it's done. And I can focus on book 4. So book 4, although is scary, it's like it's looming in the near future. I'll be starting it in May. And the story of the series, quickly for those who don't know, is that I had self-published the first 2 books, Song of Blood and Stone and Whispers of Shadow and Flame, in 2015. And in 2016, I was ready to self-publish this book 3, that I'm currently working on, the self-published version. And literally the day that I sent the manuscript for book 3 to the copy editor, was the day I got the call from my editor about her wanting to republish the series. So book 3 a version of it has been done for 3 years. And then once I signed the contract with St. Martin's Press, and I did a heavy, heavy revision of the first 2 books, for the I did a heavy revision of Song of Blood and Stone for the hardcover, like changed 60-70% of it, even though the story stayed the same. I did a big revision for book 2. Then we did this special edition for book 1, for Song of Blood and Stone, and I added like 40,000 new words, a whole new storyline. It's the special edition, which comes out in July, is 99.9% of all the original stuff is the same. I just had to add a few little things to connect the new storyline into the main previous book. And then I had to go back into book 2 and add a new storyline. And so now book 3 gets a new storyline. And so there's stuff that I'm mixing stuff in with stuff I wrote many years ago. 3 years ago is many years ago to me. And it is, on top of all the other writing things, it is taxing. And So yeah, I do feel a bit spent every day, and caring for myself and managing my stress is at the forefront of my mind because I don't want to get sick again. I think all of these, all these little colds and then even the flu is partially because of stress. Like I normally don't get sick. I'm fairly hardy as a person. But I do know that this anxiety has been changing things for me. And so, yeah, so the ongoing work of managing stress levels. And because I do love this. I do love writing, and writing to a deadline works for me. Like I love deadlines, sometimes I would love to have them be a little longer, but, the push, like I can do this. I know I can do this. And proving to myself that I can do it. Each time that I prove to myself I can do it, it helps to stave off that imposter syndrome that we all have. I mean, every writer, I think everybody who does something, there's that thing going around, like Neil Gaiman talking to astronaut Neil Armstrong. And if I can find it, I'll put it in the show notes with everything else, because it was basically just like, Armstrong had imposter syndrome. He was at some party with all these celebrities, and he didn't feel like he belonged. And like, dude, you went to the moon. Like you belong anywhere you want to be. So even, everybody feels it. And so, and each book is different and presents a new challenge, and you're kind of starting from scratch. And before I ever wrote a book, an author told me that. I think it was Marjorie Liu, who I took a workshop with at Vona. And she was like, yeah, each book is a new challenge, and you don't know how you did the last one, and you're not sure you can do it again. And it was kind of depressing at that time. Like, Marjorie Liu at that point, this was 5-6 years ago, had written dozens of books, in a short period of time. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. It was depressing, but it was also very helpful because it let me know what to expect, and that everybody goes through it. So every time I prove to myself that I can do it, every time I meet the challenge, I feel wonderful. And then I start all over again, knowing that I'm going to feel terrible and eventually come out the other side victorious, and then do it all again and again and again. And that's the point. That's the journey. That's what we signed up for. So that's all I have for this week. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I will talk to you soon. Happy reading. For episode show notes and to learn more about me and my books, go to lpenelope.com. Subscribe to My Imaginary Friends wherever you get your podcasts, and check out the video episodes on YouTube. Please leave a rating and review to help support the show.